Churches. We're going right back more to the churches because in the churches are these icons, these votaries, right? Light a candle to the Lady of Guadalupe or whoever it is, right? Go back there, idol worship, start praying to the supernatural force, and it's going to pay off because the voice is coming back. This is not something that they're not going to deliver on. All this technology is for nothing. They are not wasting all this time. They're not working on a computer, and the brain is one. I think, yeah, everybody in this world should be reading Julia James' book because you're living in something that's happening outside your peripheral vision. It's a manual, and even though he's been written as a pseudoscientist or whatever you call it, totally so bad at it. You can tell us what exactly what they're doing. It's a big exception. Actually, we're halfway through it. You've said it, though. I need to take that. I can see what's further, but this is like this exploration of the origin of consciousness. And it's probably every age of it you can stop and do. And so it's something I'll have to function just for sure. But it keeps being, sorry, go ahead. But can I ask you a question? The remedy of this is self. You don't need another voice in your head or any instruction if you can rely on your inner self. The very last thing that the controllers want. That's why they send you to school early. Right? That's why a lot of things are happening. That's why the kids are on their cell phones. It's going to get up the morning and at night. That cell phone is going to be eventually instructing you on everything that you want to do in life. You implanted it. You probably implanted it. We're heading straight for that. And people will now be forced. They'll be lining up. They've been tenderized from all the video games and what have you, done for a long, long time. And they've also been equally warned about it by other magnificent movies and stuff, but then nobody's listening. So the remedy to it is, of course, self-food. But who are the people around who are helping you develop your self-esteem? Who are the teachers around that are helping you delve into the significance of the self? Carl Jung was, Ayn Rand was. There are a few others here and there, but generally speaking, Crowley was. That's why I think he's a great man, and I wrote my article on it. There's more to the article than we got into, so people should read it. But it's very, very rare. What is the anatomy of self? It is actually the thing you're going to need. Because it didn't replace the voices of the gods. You've got it, and that's why I'm so against channeling and taking ayahuasca.
Very well, thank you.
Because all this is doing is opening yourself up to the bicameral theory again. It's weakening selfhood, not strengthening it. And it is, remember I said that we've adapted many, 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 many means of trying to restore the forces of the gods? Well, we're still doing it today in all these inauthentic ways. You still want some shaman down in Costa Rica. You seem to be the spokesman for us. We've got the wrong end of the stick. And we've mistaken this for spirituality. Because once upon a time, it was spirituality. So each person has to sit down and study this for themselves. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is exactly what people want. Maybe this is exactly what spirituality was. Maybe that's what a lot of occultism was. Occultism is based on practices, right, no matter what they are. Which is again an idea that if I draw this magic circle, God will speak to me. If I do this in a certain hour, if I boil this frog, if I do these rites, if I wear these talismans and amulets, right, if I cast the runes, whatever, the gods will speak to me. So maybe I'm the one who's got it all wrong. Maybe individuality is an eternal thing. It was a crutch. It's not ultimately wanted. And we are all signing on. We may make a few protestations on the surface, but deep down inside, if we could have self-food about that because those 3 points I think are key. If a man is good, then he wants to learn about that goodness. He wants to uncover the mysteries of himself and the moral universe, and therefore you have occultism. It could be a way to restore knowledge of a golden age that was taken from us abruptly, and like a smashed mirror, all these wonderful teachings and traditions were smashed up into millions of pieces. We're trying to put it all together, glue it all back. That's what occultism is, or it's a throwback to the Black Cat Theory. I don't have the answer. I just present these three, because in my research through the years, I've isolated these as being the most important. But that doesn't mean that now you exclude everything else that could be said about it. But through the years, these are the three outstanding categories that I put this subject into. When it comes to the origins of the occult. Yeah, this is constantly marking 10 years. This has been an unreal episode. I've been doing this for a while, and about 100,000 other questions to go off. One of them that's immediately coming through to me, I don't think you will see this for the next chat, was I was wondering if your thoughts at the end of the voice of the gods, where the separation of man from nature was what allowed then the super ego to then develop maybe, and then that started to allow man to manipulate nature more. This is the birth of science and of tools further. This is this extrapolation that's exploded more recently. But we've a lot of different tracks to go down here. So I'll maybe stop there for this week. Is there any last comment you want to make, Michael? Or yeah, go ahead. Well, I'll just make a quick comment on that. The super ego is the best modern stand-in for the voice of the gods. Because it's still a voice, absolutely. And in our ontogenetic life, who are the gods? It's our parents. So the voice of the gods then becomes our parents, naturally. And once upon a time we heard voices of other gods, disembodied voices that we took. We don't even know if they are gods, but they were just voices in our head that we took for the gods. It's in their instruction. But we will replace that with the voice of the parents and stick to it. We want to become them. And the means of doing that, taking their instruction, because we have to, we're vulnerable children, vulnerable infants, is a super ego. But luckily, there's still enough self-will later on, starting around teenage years, to start questioning it. Yeah, that does exist. That's the will. That's the individual self. It says maybe, hey, I don't trust this anymore. Or maybe I've gone out into the world, had a bit of experience, and I've listened to others, and they're saying things that are countering what my parents said. Or maybe I just see how idiotic these parents are. They do things that are very contradictory and unwholesome. And also I can see that their lives aren't really working for them. I don't want to live like that. So you can actually, luckily, unseat these voices. And that comes with a part that's attached to the super ego, Freud said, called the ego ideal. So right within our own head, in the complex of the ego, we have something that can also unchain us from the voices of the parents. So what's known as the ego ideal, which scans the world for better ideals, for heroes. Right? But heroes are connected to what I talked about earlier about self-esteem. Remember when I said that all men are good? This connects to that. Because when you embody this idea that all men are good, you automatically then want to identify with good men. And good men are heroic men. And you actually have a part of your consciousness, thank God you do, called the ego ideal, that when it's working correctly, it scans the world for heroic beings that are able to overcome, right, and move into a superior mode of being. And the more and more that you learn to identify them, the less and less you're going to identify with some stupid, failure, asshole parents. For all their posturing. Unless your parents are heroic, then it's all good and you'll grow up very, very normal. But most of us do not have heroic parents. Most of us don't even have a father in the family anymore. You see? So this all breaks down. But luckily, the ego ideal seeks out. Now, if the parents are good parents, they will bring a lot of heroic figures through storybooks and movies and music into your life. Because again, that's becoming something that's less and less. And then when you move even taking heroic figures and sort of, darken them, make them much more sort of ambivalent.
Thanks for the like.
You're not getting, heroic figures that are really pure anymore. They've been adulterated. This is all been done by design by some very, very clever people who know exactly what they're doing. Tomorrow comics, just in general. So, yeah, what do you guys in control of? Oh, yes, you see, this is what I've been trying to bring into my work, and I'm alone in it. Bringing the psychology into the conspiracy, I'm going to only personally visit and do it well. Do it right. And do this. And it was resisted by everyone who actually reflected it as a challenge. I'd say the greatest challenge of all has been this. People resisting people who should know better. People who should know that they're architects of control, what tools they've got, what weapons they're using. And yet they absolutely insist on resisting this very information that reveals the truth about them. Which can't be that there's we're living in an anti-psychological society. But nevertheless, it taught me that this is the answer. It doesn't matter about other people's resistance. That's a separate thing. You just get used to that. Yeah. I got a follow up on this discussion. It's going to be fantastic. I know already. So I'm going to leave everybody in a bit of a cliffhanger. We'll end it for there, Michael. That sounds all right.
Well, thank you, guys.
So yeah, no, it's definitely going to be one of the main focuses of this channel is this psychology and this consciousness. It's bringing it to the forefront and then understanding these mechanisms that the architects of control use to enslave us. It's about undoing those, so yeah, that's another vision for the channel going forward. And so yeah, just speaking on that again, it's a brand new channel. Again, I really wanted to make it something where we can focus on it and spend a lot more time dedicated towards. So if people wouldn't mind liking, subscribing, it's a massive help. And please check out all Michael's books and all of his articles. We will leave lots of links down below. You can find Michael on over on Slate, where he went much more deeply into these topics with great David Whitehead as well too. So yeah, that's going to do us for another week. Thank you very much once more, Michael. I really appreciate your time. Yeah, it's been brilliant. And yeah, I guess we'll see you all next time. Cheers, man. Today we have one son join us, and today we're going to look for importance of this energy. James, and then discussing the origins of religion. That's right. Thanks very much, Esther. What an incredible subject. One could speak for hours on the work of Julian James. And a forgotten genius. He was at Princeton. He was at Yale. How come we don't know this guy's work? I came across this work in the early 90s, working at bookshops in the Bay Area. I saw this unusual book. Just the look of it. For publishers thinking this was one cover, that was big, black and white. Title on the front, The Origins of Consciousness, the breakdown of the bicameral mind. I mean, who's going to chew on that? And it came out in 1976, published as a book. But it was based on an earlier paper. I think he did it in 1972. Immediately caused a flurry, and he died in 1997. So really, one could argue that he wasn't around to argue his case when a lot of new neuroscientific discoveries have been made, ones that lean more in the direction of proofs. And then what sadly happens is other people who have similar theories were wrong, and they're doing.
great man himself sort of fell by the wayside. He's acknowledged
Right.
by some neuroscientists, some open-minded psychologists, but generally speaking, he's kind of forgotten. I think of him as one of the most important thinkers ever. His ideas, I've got future plans to do all sorts of programs that, like on consciousness, on neuroscience and things like that, and sort of breaking through the materialistic mindset. He technically was a materialist. He stayed within the materialist framework, but anyone reading his works knows right away, oh, yeah, he was so much more than that. His ideas pertain to more than that. But yeah, just the fact that he's really still not honored is remarkable. Whatever books are out there, I think I have reviews on Amazon on most of the books. You know, if you go to the Julian Jaynes Society, you'll find they had a small school of followers. Some of them wrote books or edited books. I've done positive and negative comments on Amazon, but I love his work. You know, it's a huge impact for our subject, for the origins of religion. Because if you're going to believe something, try to base it on reason as well as faith. The two important psychological underpinnings. Now, what James does, you know, we'll just cover it in short here, is he's really asking you, look, in the thinking process, not only what is thinking, but what is this voice in your head that you're in communication with, that you're in actual dialogue with? The voice you take for yourself, it has your signature on it. This little voice, unless you're schizophrenic or something, or a multiple personality problems, normally you have this autobiographical self inside. So he goes on to say that, what is this inside? We're inside. Okay, we have these cavities, you know, every organ sits in a cavity. The pineal gland sits in a cavity. So yeah, it can't be dismissed that there's no inside. But where inside exactly is this process of thought? And where inside is located this voice in your head that that you speak with or that you take as yours? I mean, already once you start looking into this level of consciousness, you keep finding divides. Well, you don't have to, there's nothing odd about that. You can take out a brain and you see a divide, more than one, but there's the two big hemispheres, there's the corpus callosum, there's the mammalian brain and this brain stem. So there's plenty of divides. But where exactly is this interior space coming from where you consult with yourself or you have this running dialogue? And where did you get the idea in the first place that it's your voice? So if you listen to that voice in your head, you have spent a whole lifetime, guaranteed, and you've never, unless you have schizophrenic problems, you have never doubted that that voice, the sound of it, is you. But James is asking, why did you do that? Why are you doing that? Maybe it's not you, as people with schizophrenia, sort of testify, or at least their reality is very different. What about multiple personality disorder? There's like up to 12 different voices. Which one of those voices is the alpha voice? So suddenly, as we say, this is going to pertain to reality because don't the people who are not inspired, whether it's the skylights from centuries ago, or a guy living in a barrel, or some disciple of Jesus, or one of the prophets, and now you got the evangelist standing up going, I heard the voice of God last night. Now, where did that come from? Where did that whole phenomenon of hearing God in your head now, or the devil in your head, come from? Do you know how few religious people even bother with it? And yet the Bible is filled with it. The history of religion. And we're not talking, see, James is not just talking here about Christianity. He's talking about the religions of the world, be it over in China or wherever else. I'm just trying to make sure that it's phrased in modern language. Where you have this sense of self, and you have a voice that you take to the self, and you have this internal space where this is meant to be happening. Animals don't have anything like that. Even if they have a sense of personal identity, it's very foggy, very woolly. It's by no means sharp and defined.
This capsule two of nature's most powerful performance enhancers. They didn't originate from the lab. They evolved over millions of years. Cordyceps is a parasitic fungus.
mostly on an instinctual level. There's no real introspection, because this is a very key word with Julian Jaynes, introspection. And the man had so much to say about it because he said that this introspection is actually one of the most recent phenomena in terms of consciousness and reality. He couldn't date it even past the Homeric period, less than 1,000 years BC. So 3,000 years from where we are now. Sounds like a lot, but it's not in the greater histories of the world. But we'll go into that in a minute. But again, God-inspired person often claims, and even if they're legitimate, they're saying it's a thing in my head. I hear God talks to me. James is saying dozens of gods talk to people centuries ago in what he called the bicameral period, right? The origin of consciousness and the breakdown of the bicameral period. What the hell is the bicameral period? Well, this is a period about 3,000 years BC, up until, say, the Homeric period of about eight centuries, 800 years BC. It's not very clear because the part he's really talking about, the epoch he's talking about, is the period of decline, the breakdown of the bicameral period. So we're not really sure how long the bicameral state of mind that he describes, how long it was. You have to look at people, and it gets into complex areas. But the key for us to understand is about 3,000 years ago. It was a period that has started to break down. And that's what his book shows you. It gives you evidence for this thing. So the internal space and what we call today introspection, or as I said, that biographical I-ness. I've got autobiographical. I know what I did yesterday. I can think back to my childhood. Where does that autobiographical or thread, that history, that chronology, how does it get assembled? And just the very fact that it's mostly internal, it defines my I. Was there a period in history, he's saying? He believed that there was a period in history where that didn't exist. But that period corresponds with the rise of Judaism, which then affects Christianity. Different kind of mentation, different kind of thinking. And also the most extraordinary thing, we probably won't touch on it here a lot, but just to throw out, just to make people who are listening to this understand, there's a metaphorical space in your head. To get around in the head doesn't find, like I say, you can find cavities, and you can sure find cultures who believe that's coming from here. My voice speaks from my stomach. My voice speaks from the heart. That's right there in Plato and the Greeks. But again, it seems to be more a metaphor. The whole idea of an internal consciousness, internal dialogue, internal thoughts, internal capacities like introspection, they're not really in a true physical space. They're in a metaphorical space. So how the hell did that come about? In fact, how did metaphor at all come about? I'm as hungry as a wolf, or I'm as cold as a block of ice.
Dialogue
I can eat a
actually
horse.
means talking to God. Dia or Dio is God.
What's that? Why does that infuse our language?
Interesting.
We're not going to look at that today, but what is metaphor? Where did that come from? Why do I, now today we got like, everything's just like, like, it was like this, like, and if we just add the word like right into any sentence, no matter what sentence it is, well, sure enough to be true if we like it. Like is metaphor. If something's not itself, but it's like that, then nothing is of itself. I'm not describing anything of itself. And I'm relying on the metaphor. It's like something else. But if I go to that something else and you have to describe it, well, it's like something else. Right. So nothing is as it is. Everything is defined by something other. And that's become standardized. This is the standardized acceptance. Where does the idea of metaphor and simile even come from? Why do we communicate like that? He or she talks like an empty can rattling. Oh, there's so many examples of this. It's incredible. And one would do well to observe how we speak in metaphor. It does also have an impact in terms of religion. Because right away, you have sun worship. Sun worship is and the attributes of the sun and of light. Isn't that all around religion? the illumined one. He beamed like the great light. I saw a great light. He was illumined. I became enlightened. What is all this? Metaphor, metaphor, metaphor. Holy Mother Church. So just bear that in mind. But James is wanting to hone in on how did this all even begin? If there's no genuine internal space where this you can dig in and put a microscope and see it, then it's obviously a metaphor. Well, how did metaphor come about? And he links it to language. He links it to the breakdown of the bicameral period, which is before that. And what he called the bicameral period, something else was going on. That's what we really want to explore is what was going on. But a lot of other questions come from this.
Well, stop, but I've got a question for you. How many streams of income do you have right now? Maybe you're thinking, well, I've got my salary.
But again, just think of it in very basic terms. Introspection, the idea that you have a personal voice inside your head where you can sit there and abstract from reality a particular thing that just happened, learn from it, think back on it. How do I feel about that? Hey, that was meant to be such a great event. Now it's over. I'm not really that sure. All of this introversion that happens on a momentary daily is really checking back to your feelings more than it is your thoughts. But in any case, if something like reading James can prove that there was a time in which there was no introspection, no sense of biographical I, no questioning what you did. So then we have this new, in other words, he would say in his words, it's not a normal neural phenomenon. You can see what all the neurons are doing, but introspection itself doesn't seem to be anything but extremely unusual and different. It doesn't really exist in any of the animals or plants. Their focus is almost entirely the world, not how they feel about it. They're not able to stand back and have awareness. We're aware of many processes. That is so original and unique is where he's coming at it. A lot of psychologists and neuroscientists do the same. And the way that they would put it is that consciousness is not just reducible to cognition. The actual movement of neurons and the nervous system, that's just your natural functions. But consciousness, how many species have that cognition going on at various phases? But consciousness, that seems to be of a premium. And self-consciousness, even more. Because animals are certainly conscious. Great, very, very deep study. And he did. And his evidence then came from the deep study of the past, of the arts, especially the writings, but also the customs of ancient man. He's focused on Homeric man. This is Grecian, the time of the Iliad, the Odyssey, these great sweeping stories. But one of those great sweeping stories is the Old Testament. And he kind of realized that the stories that are told in the Old Testament have tremendous differences from those that come even later in the Old Testament, or in any of the world's traditions, but particularly this because he knew that the Judeo-Christian world is very familiar with those texts. All right, he said. Why does none of the heroes, prophets, big characters, Abraham, Joseph, the whole slew of them, Saul, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Aaron, why are none of these characters introspective? It's all big, sensible, need to mill, answering to God's voice outside, answering to the Pharaoh, talking to the crowd, talking to the holy ones. There's never any of these moments of the great philosopher sitting and worrying or sitting there contemplating. You don't get this. You get it only in some late characters of the later Old Testament. But the bulk of it, there's no such introspection. David, Solomon, whoever you're dealing with, don't sit down and ponder and existentially, question themselves. They just act directly on what God is saying. So that's what I mean about these writings. And he honed in on the Old Testament, and he honed in on the Iliad. And that's why he found this extraordinary fact. Up until this Homeric period, you don't get introspection in any of the great works. But when you think that you may be doing, a close reading shows, no, this is not the case. In all these world religions, and so in 1972, then he wanted to do a paper on that, which then led to the book. And a new concept of consciousness is its origins was What he's basically saying is that the consciousness of the ancients, and these would be the people whose accounts are meant to be in the Old Testament, whoever the authors of even the Testaments, you know, the author of the Book of Enoch, you know, whatever you got, Greek works, apocryphal works, their mentality was radically different than ours. For instance, before the Iliad, there's not even a word for mind. There is no word for mind up until say the 8th century BC. So 800, 700 years BC. Before that period, you don't even get a word for thought or mind. By the way, just to remind people, mind, even in our language, mind is a verb. It's already action. So check that out. It's a verb, meaning a process. What? And other words for mind that we have today, or say in a different language like Latin or Greek, when you actually trace it back, it just stops. It doesn't have any solid antecedent. They're antecedents of these words traced to recent historical times. And in many of the most ancient chronicles and stories and myths and sagas, there's not even a word for it. Plenty of words for action, plenty of scenes of action, but not of contemplation. In the sense where you can, the I is being related, like it would be saying later in Shakespeare and Plato. Sorry, what am I talking about? In Shakespeare, in the terms of Hamlet or Othello, there's no brooding, there's no sitting alone by candlelight contemplating one's moral infractions or anything like that. In other words, it's these processes of introspection are recent in history. So this is where we're at, right? So, all right, great. Tell us what they did before then. And so Julian James's work is to try and sketch out what kind of thinking, if even we were thinking, was going on. And this will have an impact for psychology, you know, the neuroscience, why there's 2 and more hemispheres of the brain. It has impact. And that's why it's unforgivable that it's been basically thrown aside. And so for religious people, how many of them listening to us have thought about what kind of actual thinking was going on back there? And even more radical, was it so drastically different? And we're familiar with in 3,000 years following the Sumeric period. A bicameral means 2 enclosures or chambers, actually would be a better word. So that relates to, you know, that the brain, well, we have 2 chambers in the brain. It's the right and left hemisphere. So those who are really up to speed with that, yeah, this is going to be mapped over that. But we only have time here to sketch it out in the most basic way, right? So he would have said that what we now call right brain is maybe with a verbal, there was a thing called verbal hallucinations. And the left brain was originally just a listener, it heard. These, what can only be called internal hallucinations. But these voices were taken as the voices of the gods, plural. And they were issuing instructions about how to live. So we've answered the question. We didn't think in this sort of biographical way with a central self. We heard voices. And of course that answers then why there's a metaphorical space. They've studied schizophrenics today who have this problem, and they go, okay, now we have some understanding why you assume that there is this metaphorical headspace in which things are happening and voices are heard. So we, on the other hand, then after this period of hearing these audio hallucinations started to fade, and it took hundreds, took up to 1,000 years for this to happen. The modern age, according to James, really begins in terms of a hard, identifiable ego, and again, autobiographical self. So one hemisphere spoke, one hemisphere sort of listened and followed. And when the instructions came in, they were considered the origin. That's why it's important for our work here, of the gods, plural. Later it would change. The single voice of a god would come later. during this period, we heard these voices within, and that gave us the effect, like a pinhole camera or whatever way you want to look at this, of a voice inside. This is the key, the inside. But it's purely metaphorical, says Julian James.
If you live in the UK and have been injured in the last 3 years in an accident that wasn't your fault, then you could be entitled to thousands, if not tens of thousands, in compensation. This could be anything from an accident at work, slipping or tripping while out and about, to traffic accidents and medical negligence. It's quick and easy to find out if you have a claim. Just click below and answer a few simple questions to get your free confidential claims assessment. The best part is that if you do have a claim, your solicitor will operate on a no-win, no-fee basis. So if they don't win your case,
And work I'm going to be doing in the future is going to dive into that to see if that's true, or there's even another account of metaphor and all. We don't want to get into it right now. But just the idea of an internal space. Why are we going through school and not ever been asked? What? This is not the Stanford level of university. Oh yeah, I had to get to university before I inquired about the space within. Then the defunctness of the world, the defunctness of our education. And how many people have autonomously stopped for 1 second to say, who's this voice talking? Why do I imagine it's got a signature me on it? It's just a voice in the head. And more so, where did it come from? What's its actual etiology? What's its actual history? It's absolutely fascinating. So when I was reading Julian James and similar people back then in the 90s and what have you, it fascinated me. Hell, it fascinated me since the 70s, growing up watching Doctor Who. The Mask of the Mandragora. Check that episode out and see what happens to you. So one other thing he added that we didn't really quite underline here is that communication was now the replacement for the bicameral period. If the voice of instruction of the gods fades for any reason, and he claims it did, one thing is that we're going to need some structure. We need to know what to do. The direction manual, it's like the direction manual covered in rain. It's just ink on the paper. Oh my God, what do I do? So human communication and human language then takes on a much different role. It probably existed before, but in a very primitive state. Now it was needed because of the added need of instruction. And so this maps over what linguists know about the evolution. Like I said in the Homer, there's not even a word for the color blue, for instance. It's another one, right? There's also omissions. But James's genius was to notice the omissions in terms of any reference to a cognitive process. Nobody sits down and mumbles for any length of time. Doubts. Oh, no, there's doubt, but it's doubt in it's inflected towards a very physical sort of demeanor or disposition. So bicameral man then obviously acted more like a robot, which is another way of saying that whatever the voices were doing, they were kind of unconscious. If you ask somebody, why are you doing that? They just look at you and go, meaningless. Don't understand. I don't contemplate why I do anything. There's no why in my doing. There's just raw doing. So it takes us to wrap our minds around this. You would never ask a child, so why are you doing that? Oh, this is the child life of mankind historically. They couldn't answer because it never dawned on them to ask why they're doing a particular thing. And James is unpacking that by saying, well, even if in the building of a house or making of fishing nets or whatever, making of a bow and arrow, anything that they would have done because they were instructed to do it. And another thing he adds is that the voices may have faded because we got living in bigger, metropolitan areas. When we were living in small villages, that apparently the voices were stronger and it was easier to carry out their instructions. As things got more amorphous, and people can criticize this is just his idea, that they start to fade as more voices are heard outside or influences. There's a Star Trek from the original series, but I can't remember the name of it, of course, but it's about people living in the Garden of Eden and worshipping a big serpent head. I can put a link below later to find the name of it. And the serpent is a big oracle that just speaks, and you do, and that's it. And of course, everyone is perfectly happy. because there's no self-reflexivity to make you unhappy. There's no contemplation of your place in the universe. There's no dilemmas necessarily, and even if there is, the big voice is going to tell you, here's how to get out of it. So this could then create a perpetual innocence. Right, right, remember that. A perpetual state of innocence that is a very beloved state when the big authority is telling us what to do and how to do it. Mark that. We'll come back to that. But again, just on the primitive level, hey, why did you do that? No answer will come at that point. Now this is, you can map a few things over this. Without going into great detail, Freud's origin of the superego, probably one of the centers of the man's work. But this thing called the superego that grows out of the ego, this can be mapped over that because it also is some sort of interjection of from an outside source, but it also works as a voice in the head. James, the voice is inside and works on that to get us to have our own biographical voice. That's the etiology. It's mostly from inside. But Freud is saying, well, no, the parents, it's their stern voice, the carrot and the stick methodology, that turns the super ego within, and then that takes over the rulership of consciousness. It might flood you with guilt, for instance. Now we don't know if in bicameral period guilt played a part. It probably did in some way. If I disobey the voices, I go throw myself off a cliff. I'm riddled with guilt. And that's a possible origin of lighting candles and doing rituals. And your previous guest talked about blood rituals. So I thought, hey, well, wait a minute. If there was a guilt mechanism happening, it's unlikely because the superego is the origin of the guilt complex. But wait a minute, there may have been a version of that. There may have been a nucleated version of guilt, and that could have then said, I must sacrifice to the god immediately, to show I'm sorry. So there's, like I said, there's lots of ways to go with this, but in this bicameral state, because you were instructed minute by minute, you didn't really need a memory. So memory is something that probably, in the form that it is today, is recent as well. Because you have to, once you have the biographical self, the autobiographical self, then you need memory to make it a continuum. But if you're just obeying instructions, there's really no need because they'll instruct you again. I don't need to refer to the previous pages and say, well, what did we do last time? There's no need. You're just going to do what you'll do this time. End of story. There's no I at this point. That is a late development. I wonder how many religious people know that. And if anything is recent, if anything is nascent, if anything is abiding in innocence, it's weak. It needs structure. Now, in other work, I make clear that we as human beings still struggle. In fact, if we talk about any pathological condition like schizophrenia and all the other cocktail of them, could those be born from the pathology of this sense of self-reflexivity and this self-reliance? If all differentiated states are recent, and then the great need to focus only on yourself and be instructed by yourself, isn't that going to create a tremendous reaction of insecurity? Well, it has, and I'm not the only scholars all over the world have accepted this. That level of autonomy is deeply threatening. Most of us still prefer to be told what to do. Wear your mask. Yeah, okay, whatever. So conscious, willful, self-asserting, self-directing states of consciousness are recent, and they are loathed by most people. Does that account for the hyper-collectivism of which religion is a part? You don't have religion without collectivism. Sorry, they go together. Right? Are we looking at something to explain it here? And the fanaticism of which you want to shut the door on the world, or even shut the door on the whole of creation. When you believe in the supernatural entity, most of those, including Christianity, are faithfully Gnostic or quasi-Gnostic, which you just see the world of reality as a filthy place that can't be rid of. But James's idea led some to believe that the bicameral mind is similar, as I say today. The last vestige of it can be seen in the schizophrenic, and there's a lot of work that's been done on that. They hallucinate all the time. they hear voices. They have a very sort of weak and vague sense of selfhood. The self-schema, as it's called, is not particularly strong with schizophrenics. They too live a rather impoverished life. They're never motivated to create anything. They literally could sit down and stare at a wall for hours. There's no inner life. But if you tell them, hey, dinner's ready, come on, well, okay. In other words, little ego control. I always found myself that the history of the ego, the history of the divisions of the psyche, these were extremely interesting subjects. Now, of course, what things come from this, right? If you're just following orders of some hallucinated voices inside your head, then everybody's doing the same thing. So it goes without saying that this is hive mind. This is the essence of collectivism. And today, when some meathead gets up and proclaims, to all of us, this is the way to go, we have this extra hypnotic attention, don't we? Obama or whatever it might be, see, this AOC, where we have this extra level of attention. It wouldn't even matter. It could be Trump or anybody else. What is that dynamic all about? Well, if for thousands of years you were like, hail master, yeah, then these phenomena today can be quite easily understood, right? And any national fantasies, any collective hysteria, as we've witnessed over and over again for the last 5 years, educated people have seen it all the way through the decades. The Nazis, the Soviets, the communists, the unbelievable, the football game, all of this collectivism is implicated here in the chorus, the Greek chorus. So, after the collapse, voices start to fade. This is what really interests me a lot. And so when that happens, several things that can be gleaned from James's work come about, and they're all fascinating. One is, and I'm abbreviating this list, but one is the worship of the dead. So you go back into the ancient pre-Celtic world, you get the skull. And you find this worship of the skull across the planet in various forms. Because now that the voices have gone, dead bodies were preserved in a very special way because they believed that the dead bodies still contained the voice. And so you had to be reverent. And maybe on certain occasions, the dead will speak to you. That's where we get necromancy from. Because now it's born out of extreme panic. So you preserve the skull as an oracle that might speak to you or give you directions or you have a special reference for the grave that the dead are put in. You dig up places in different parts of the world where there's mass graves. I mean, just bodies piled on each other like a mound. That place they found out later was very sacred. Yeah, because if the voices are fading, wouldn't then the people come near to where the dead are? And for all you know, the voices did resound. This is what Julian James is saying. The hallucinations were stronger around the dead body. It was actually there. When you were in the presence of the dead, you actually heard the voices. Like the volume had suddenly, static on a radio. I had the static is gone. I hear. Check out another Doctor Who series from the 70s called Face of Evil. This is all brought out. So, and then not only the graves, but the reliquaries of the dead, their effects. Remember the pharaohs? They were always buried with loads and loads of personal belongings and effects. That was a sort of a salve. That was a hope that the voice would speak. As time went by, he started to venerate idols, but these are votive idols. Votives are the little statuettes that you keep finding in Syria when they dig up, and even in India you still get it today. And the whole idea that a little statue, like these Catholics, Mother Mary nonsense in Ireland, sure, have to have that. And then, the Lady of Guadalupe, the little icon, the little statue that's put reverently on an altar. Actually, Julian James says the voices used to come through those. That's how that all began. And that could be as primitive as like a stone. I think you're going back too far, but even stone worship. Should you have it today with the Shiva Lingam and people buying, a crystal or the whole palava, buying a picture of the Madonna or whatever. Right? This is all coming out of that, he says. And you sit in front of it and just hope that it'll speak to you. Then, in the desperation, came sacrifice. This is why, watching the previous guest, I felt that was such a brilliant thesis that she was saying there. Is because, yeah, here's the reason for God and a sacrifice, be it in blood or anything else. Desperation. I've got to have those voices back. Let me, throw a couple of skinned animals in the mix, or, let me sacrifice my baby or something like that to win back the voice of the gods. Because without it, I'm just basically, I wouldn't even know how to fill a field. I wouldn't even know how to bring water from the well. So then James gets ambitious and says that the fall of the great Sumeria, Egypt, and Persia is occurring. Babylon, whatever you've got. This is the result of the decline of the voices of the gods. The essence of those civilizations where the Pharaoh and his priests are the ones who hear the voice of the gods is no longer happening. So chaos in the streets. Chaos in the streets. And the idea is that, we're not instructed. The whole hierarchy dissolves. There's no reason for it. There's just like, the master is dead at his desk, and there's no more memos coming down, no more instruction. So there's evidence that even whole cities were abandoned. And James puts this down to the evacuation of these cities. The Anasazi Indians would be just one that jumps to my head, but there's been plenty more. These were happening because the central voice was no longer speaking. And he says that this accounts for a lot of dispersion of European and other races where they're just sort of walking about. It's over. That level of that phase of civilization is over. Also, when you move about like that, and you're increasingly a big horde of people, just the problems of life become more complex. The very opposite of what you need when you're having a direct instruction. Now there's too much to do. Now there's too many things that need to be instructed, and not a central oracle showing you what to do. That then leads to the lack of a feeling of structure. Which in terms of culture and civilization, that's the end of it. And so the final voices fade. And then what comes after that is the historical period. Different dates are offered. 1000 BC, the Homeric period, after which the voices are basically gone, except maybe in a few exceptional people, a few exceptional circumstances, a few exceptional places. But it's basically over, this era. So anyone left who claims to hear the voices, or who does, don't you see, they become venerated beyond where even emperors will want to come and take their counsel. Caesar, speak them up. Well, now we're at the phase of the priesthood. The phenomena of priesthood is explained by Julian James. He's not the only one to theorize, but this is particularly profound and, I think, very accurate. Because now that the internal voices are gone, couldn't you expect a bunch of charlatans? Here's everybody in a totally dispersed situation, all unstructured, and it's easy for people to come along, say, yes, but we hear the gods. We are your new instructors. No, you're not. Get out of here. No. The priesthoods were super successful, be they in Egypt. And so the Judaic period, the Israelite period, Julian James looks to this, and they're chronicled in the Old Testament and the antics that go on and the meeting of this Jehovah on the hill, led by Moses. Something's going on here where the priest is now saying, listen to me and I'll lead you back. He doesn't have much currency that says, listen to me. That came later. Listen to me because I know where the voice of the gods are. Oh, brilliant. That's exactly what we've been looking for. Show us the way, mate. Oh, it's across the milk and honey river and up there in the mountain and all this. And so the priesthoods begin. And then one priest creates a priesthood. Melchizedek, Aaron, with the Levites, the Shilohites, who have you got? Right? The rabbis, all of it. They're jumping on this bandwagon right quick to exploit the fact that people are lost and people need this structure. And as I said, side to them, guess what you get? Julian James is quite clear to say that otherwise people, even witches, all of this stuff of witches and sages and soothsayers and sibyls, oracles, starts to emerge at this point. really because the voices are gone. So a lot of this is bound to be chicanery from a very early period. But what we're talking about now is, of course, external instruction. Something massive has taken place, and it's seen in the literature of the ancients, in which now
All right, mate. It's still raining, isn't it? I fell asleep. What? In church? Oh. Oh, nice. All right, mate. All right, well, give me a shot when you make it on down. All right, mate. Bye. Excuse me.
Now, it's all about what king, what priest has to rival and fight with others and get to the top of the heap. Also,
language, remember, is part of that external instruction. So this is the era in which you get sophistry, you get language ramping up, and you get sophistry because it's the one with the silver tongue who's going to probably be your new leader. And then the politicians see that and they go, oh, hey, we've got to adopt that. And so, by the time of Plato, this is already quite mature, this idea. But even on a more secular level, prayer. Prayer comes about because you're maybe sitting in front of this idol or a cauldron or a skull or something, and you generally now need to pray to get the voices back. We're doing it today. And all that prayer is a call to say, inner voice instruct me. I'll make even a special shrine in my house. We'll design a temple, a special temple on a special hill in the city and the town. And what fascinated me, because I'm into the divination arts, what fascinated me when I read it is that divination in the form of astrology, tarot, whatever, grew out of this as well. The voices are not speaking to you directly. So you have to go to a soothsayer, you go to a witch, you go to somebody who can, cast the spells, or just lay out a chart, throw some yarrow sticks around, read a turtle's back, read your palm, whatever it might be. This is one of the great origins of this. And in my studies to do with tarot and divination, I came across this and found it extremely accurate. If you take out the major arcana, for instance, it's all in there. This story is actually, I wish these highbrows in Princeton who wanted to debunk Julian James actually knew anything about anything, but they don't. So there you go. But what we would call oracles, the oracle of Delphi, the oracle of Samothrace, the oracle of Ephesus, the oracle to which the pharaoh and his mother and the wife would constantly go. They gave advice, right? Today, we say, like these televangelists, but other people speak of internal mystical experiences, inner guides. Look at this new age thing about inner, I'm hearing the inner guide. And as I said, then came the ruler. See, most of my work on James is done in my female Illuminati thesis in the DVD program, because I was trying to show how the priestesses became powerful, because as oracles became powerful, women priestesses were known very much for the first time, especially in a sort of ubiquitous way, like the Sibylline oracles, for instance. And the Sibylline books are the entire basis of the Book of Revelation. The Book of Revelation is actually a very poorly written rescripting redaction of the Sibylline oracles that were known throughout the whole of the Roman Empire from before. Everything that you get inside the Book of Revelation is from the Sibylline oracles in a sort of jumbled way. And this was known to scholars, so why that debate has raged for years, I just can't even imagine. But the idea is that these then became the advisors. And there's so much chicanery involved in it. Women start to set themselves up as oracles, read the entrails. And if you look at the major arcana, card 2 is the high priestess, card 3 is the empress. There's a reason for that. She's holding a scroll. The high priestess is holding a scroll. So an age came where you not only had priesthoods, but you had a whole gynocracy. And the Old Testament, there's wars raging. It's all secretly in the Old Testament. So they just wanted to scrub that cult, even though they appropriated loads and loads of motifs. Right? But this is the cult of Asherah, the cult of Anat, the cult of Astarte. It was all over Canaan and Syria. And so when you hear about drinking the blood, like your previous guest was talking about, what might not be clear is that actually, even though it's a priest doing it, he's appropriated that motif. It's thousands and thousands of years older. It's actually part of the goddess cult. And even his costume, the way he dresses, and all the rest of it, the way he gathered a mound and all, half the stuff, if not more, is actually nothing to do with male cultism. It was abstracted, like you do when you go and loot a culture. You say, no, it's ours. But, a clever person looking back and say, none of that is yours. This was nothing. Even ritual sacrifice was probably not a male invention. I argue in the female Illuminati that all of that, whether it's castration or circumcision or drinking from a cup, blood from a cup, baby's blood, even all that, that's nothing to do with men. That's an appropriation. We're already talking about way late in the day. So that needs to be added as well. But your reason for going, the Caesar's wife goes to an oracle, is to gain instruction. So James has basically got himself there, a powerful theory that should not be dismissed. It is supported. In fact, even the critics, when they hone in on what they think are the weaker parts of his work, like how could this all happen simultaneously across the world? There was no connection with these tribes. They were cut off by water, or they were cut off. Nobody knew each other. These fatuous, idiotic critiques. Yeah, ever heard of a thing called cataclysm? Catastrophism? That happened all over the world. And you just need to plug that into James's work, and it's all consistent. What's wrong with you people? Get out your Velikovsky. It's not really that hard. Get out your Velikovsky, get out your Julian James, and see if the dots connect. But see, we are living with such deceivers. So again, that's what I've done. Catastrophism explains where a trauma came from. Because one of the weaknesses in James is he doesn't really explain where the bicameral period started. He talks about it and leading up to where we are. But what kind of events caused the bicameral period? He hints that it's trauma. He actually does hint that it is trauma, but then drops it, doesn't go into any detail with it. So that can be seen as a fault, or we could chase it up, find out, hey, wait a minute. And then you bring in people who did talk about trauma and you link them together. And then you have your answer. The great ancestral trauma that I speak about shattered the brain, shattered our consciousness, and to hold that consciousness together, it's quite likely that we heard these auditory hallucinations as an attempt of consciousness to hold itself together after a devastating event that would cause massive worldwide dissociation. So the stupid critics are just having you on. They're not critics at all. Then, to come to the conclusion here, you see, what we've been saying, right, is, and now it can be explicitly said, in the need for external instruction, we get religion. Oh, we don't get one religion, we get the religions all over the world. All over the world, I don't care where you're coming from. the worship of votaries and amongst the Aboriginals in Australia and Latin America, the Celts with their skulls and their shield gigs and their extreme emphasis on stone circles and oracles, God knows what, the Egyptians, the Copts. Once you've understood James's theory, you're really up to speed on a lot of phenomena. The guy at the end of the church, he's not, because we're doing it. But later it becomes, okay, like I said, language gets really, really polished. Religion is instantiated, never to go away. And we start getting open to all the different paths and schools, all the different ideas and traditions. Yeah, because we're looking for external instruction. Because we've lost the lodestone, we've lost the inner mooring when life was so much simpler and easier. And so that's why we might even have turned to solar worship, or solar worship predates even the bicameral period. But even though a thing may have been there before, what we're talking about now is it really become emphasized. Divination has been tracked in China long before the bicameral period. Yeah, but it's not that the phenomena began, it's just that the phenomena was now more ramped up. It was more assiduously worshipped. So much so that we needed these female oracles. And that's the beginning of your feminism. That's the beginning of your female power. Is because of the loss of the voice of the internal gods and goddesses. Right? Anyone can come along now and say, yeah, I can read some entrails or whatever. And it's not even to say that those oracles don't work. That's a whole subject, that would last forever. Does the divination work? Is astrology the replacement of the voice of the gods in some bizarre way? Does it even work? Maybe it does for you or for somebody else. Or the tarot cards can be seen in a new light now. The greater reliance on the external authority gives you the priest, gives you the priesthood, gives you the king, gives you Confucius, it gives you Muhammad, it gives you Buddha. It's what he says I'm going to follow. It gives you Jesus. We're the ones demanding and saying it's okay that now it's reduced to one figure. Yeah, it's Abraham. Good. We're back to that simplicity. It's Jesus. Back to simplicity. Back to my brain, my structure, once was oriented in this unpleasant place called reality through these internal voices. If I can't have them again, or to return to that kind of state means I'm schizophrenic, I'll be put into a rubber room. Well, the next best thing is to take external instruction, but from somebody's voice. And if that guy says, I'm enlightened, I see the light, I can lead you to paradise, shit, that's a good deal. That's good. That's what we want. Yeah, that's the manual for me. So there's a lot to comprehend in this for sane people to contemplate, not say yay, not say yes or no. But sadly, most people are not up to it. This is a very, it would require a lot of gray cells to get into this. It requires neuroscience and a lot of other psychologies and really stepping back and zooming out from what you believe. And of course, we know that's, and right down into your DNA, that's not what we want. The earlier man from which we're descended was a puppet on a string. And his life was much more simple than it is now. But I'm just a believer that, we need to step up. We need to get familiar. If you're a believer in something, get up and don't be afraid to look at all sides of the question. The basic questions, and also something more tricky. Don't just accept it. No, that's not a good thing. And maybe down the line, we can look at more deeply at what James is talking about, because there is this, we really do have to understand the nature of psychopathology, multiple personality disorder, how you can not just have one voice in your head, as we said earlier, but a multiplicity of them. But I think we've done a really good job here sketching out the basics and showing that this is a very plausible origin of religion.
Michael Tazarian, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to Esoteric Thoughts. Today we have Michael Tazarian joining us. Michael, can you talk to us about the ideas and traditions known to the Greeks that influenced Jews and Christians?
Sure, that's a huge subject. You've had Professor McDonald and Grimikin on, who are the leading, to me, they're the leading minds on that. I've studied it myself for many decades. There's a lot to say on it. I wanted
Ideas and traditions known to the Greeks that influenced Jews and Christians.
Sure, that's a huge subject. You've had Professor McDonald and Grimikin on, who are the leading, to me, they're the leading minds on that. I've studied it myself for many decades. There's a lot to say on it. I wanted to do more, but what host brings you on to talk about that, right? It's really not that common, as Professor McDonald said on the very last podcast that you did there. So it's still something amazingly that needs to come forth, but there are incredible parallels, and I'm so glad you invited me back to talk about this, because there's something that no one else has brought out really that needs to be brought up about this cross-pollination between those two cultures.
Just doing a bit of
We
research.
do know things like most Christians know
What
that
about
the Greeks,
you?
after the time of Alexander, moving up towards AD, did translate. The Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. That alone should tell them that there was a lot of collusion between the two groups, and that there was a lot of interest. The Greek Empire, for one, somewhat similar to the Roman, was not violent, and it was very ecumenical and open and egalitarian. So there was a lot of cross-pollination. But apart from your two guests, and one other reference that I'll make later on, that I carry on like a Bible, there hasn't been that much interest in it extraordinarily, and I think we can guess why, because of what it does. But the first thing to say, there's so much to go into, but and we'll get to direct examples of this in Greek influence in a minute, but certainly one wants to sketch in some background to see the origin of the Greek culture that we're talking about, coming out of the Mediterranean area, starts around about the second millennium BC. It's 2,000 years BC, around about the time that Abraham is walking the earth. In other words, we're Judaism. Now, we're not talking about Ralph Ellis here, right? Let's for a moment bracket the masterly work of that man to show you who the Israelites really are, the high sauce. Let's just keep that out of it, because that just is mind-boggling. So in comes Abraham from Ur, from the Chaldeans, the great patriarch that even Islam recognizes as a great patriarch. At this time, when Abraham is making the move south into the Holy Land, the Greek Empire, the empire hasn't started, it's the earliest movements, the flicker. See, before that, you had the Mycenaeans. Nobody knows really much about them. All of it is known as that they vanished before this Abrahamic period off the face of the earth. Whenever you read that in history book, it's because cataclysm is taking place. They just don't want to admit cataclysm. So the Mycenaeans disappear into smoke. And the first elements of the Greek culture that later become this empire, stretching up to Alexander the Great, it starts to move slowly to colonize the Mediterranean area. You're getting this, but again, the timing would be around the Abrahamic period, roughly. We were just talking roughly, right? So, people like myself who studied it for a long time found it interesting the way that the oral tradition moved up to Homer and Hesiod and others, Euripides, and then those ideas are found in Judaism or even in the Christian Bible, or the story of Jesus, no less, is kind of obvious. But the trouble is, it's not obvious to everybody else. But both traditions, and this is not unique, I'm not saying this is unique, but both cultures have certain similarity because they start with oral tradition. And we know that Native American, Indian, and even Irish, that's true. To a lot more than just Jews and Greeks, that they have an oral tradition. But it is something in common. Astrotheology, something again that will be left out by all commentators today. And in the past, that is common. Once you actually do the work and dig in to the anecdotes of Jesus walking on the water or the fishermen crossing the lake, the casting of nets, whatever you find in the Greek or in the Hebrew, the Jewish, Israelite, obviously the default position is astrotheology, and maybe even Professor McDonald and others don't even really grasp that. So your show is very special here because you're bringing things together that even some of these top scholars would probably go, that's a head scratcher, or astrotheology, what's that? Of course, some are into it and some aren't. Right? But these sidereal motifs and the story of the hero's journey, there's a lot there that is
no, the live title is a
obscure
fact.
to the reader, but the initiated person
Spirituality
gets it and goes, And what I would
is
always
the
add there is,
cloak
look, that doesn't come from those cultures. If those cultures
of
were just 2,000 years BC, look, these
worst
astrotheological
in
myths
society.
predate that. So maybe who are
Those
these
who
Mycenaeans?
claim to be enlightened, namaste,
Because
namaste,
if you're going to talk,
namaste,
if you're really going to talk about the
are
Greek
usually
influence on Christianity and
far
Judaism,
from it.
who are these
They're usually the
Mycenaeans?
worst.
Who, in fact, for that matter, who are the other
Same
ancestral
as religion.
races of the Greeks that they themselves write about?
Those who are
Thracians?
pious
How
religious
many people
people
do?
are
Dorians?
usually filthy
Ionians?
little fucking
Archaeans?
perverts, and they hide
can be
behind
thrown in there
religion.
somewhere. There's a lot of ancestral groups, and that means that's not all of it.
Both the
Greek,
same.
in fact, is really. if you
Namaste,
really get
namaste,
into it, you'll find that the
namaste.
Greek peninsula,
It's
is
a
dwarfed
very
by the
good
massive
disguise for the
Turkish.
fucking worst in
This is really
society.
Anatolian, not Turkish,
People who
you know,
say that
today,
they're
nothing like
enlightened and
that. An incredible
you know
Aryan
all that
empire
shit is
existed
because they're
just
fucking
across the
bad
world.
people.
So there had to be a lot of intermarriage. Alpheus has always pointed out that Cretans,
Not all of them.
Hyksos, they might have been, were already
Oh,
Minoans,
all
and
very much
Egyptians
so.
were connected. So the
Not all
Mediterranean
people,
and much,
not
much
all
wider
people,
were all connected.
but
But
lots.
who are these ancestral races that you're going to talk about?
And
But back to the point. By the first millennium,
actions
said
speak
there was
louder than words.
the beginning, the sort of the
But the words they
teething,
use also
the
can be
early
very
stages of
venomous
both
and
cultures
poisonous.
seem to coalesce in two
Some of
millennia.
the worst people, some of
As we
the
move up to
biggest,
1 millennium
nastiest
BC,
bully
this
cunts
is where the Greek Empire now
who
has
bully and prey
spread
on the fucking poor and
in
unfortunate.
2 colonies. They share at
And the
this point now
most
they've become
spiritual,
But yeah, let's turn
hurting
that
people.
list of 6 different or more different. These are the ones that I would say out of a whole mass of different similarities. So maybe could you read the first one at least? We'll go from there.
They spread as
No,
the Jews
I'm
did,
just listening to this because it's interesting.
without
that's just a fact.
central locus.
I'm just putting it out there, and I'll put it out there every single time.
Central locus
Because
control. You see,
I hate
outside,
bullies,
so one could look into that as being
especially
similar. I would not say, oh, those
the
are
ones who
But there
hide
is a
behind the
similarity between the 2 cultures in terms of culture.
spiritual,
Go to the next one.
religious bullshit.
Divine world occupied their thinking in early states.
Now, this one's more important because this is absolutely characteristic.
Oh no, that hate, but just
That you find
dislike
that from the
greatly.
very early period of these cultures, they're looking up. Gods matter to them. Their pantheon
frauds.
matters.
Is that
What
what
the
they
gods do, and the goddesses do. The whole Roman and later modern, era is based on these gods and
Because
their
what they
derivation.
do
Just 'cause
and what they
Mars
say
changed his name to
are
Ares,
2 different
you don't know
things.
this, Cape or Juno and Hera. Forget about that. The Prometheuses, the great gods. A clever person can see that there's even an
And they're
Egyptian
unhinged.
tie-in here.
You
and
say
all
something-
this is still to be answered.
Oops. You say something that
In the
fucking
content, we'll talk about that.
breaks a fucking little false economy, and they go absolutely fucking loop the loop. Vitriolic viciousness. You know, a real genuine spiritual religious person would never scream and shout. Hello. Yes, true though. You on, my love? It's true then, Miss Pepper, that you agree? The truth will always come out. I'm naked below the neck and above the waist. Oh, that's too short. Now you're here, Mr. Pepper. How are you, my love? What should we go for today? The Big Gay Sparky 13 star. I think it's perfect today. Oh, it's warm here. How are you? I had a shave. Hey, Miss Pepper. Oh, it's warm. It's warm, but funnily enough, there won't be any sunshine until, I don't reckon, until at least the 22nd. Considering this solstice, they like to mess around with the sky and the sunlight that comes through. How are you anyway, Miss Pepper? Oh, yes, we do cosmic dance, so I find that very much for people on here. And you'll probably find with people on here will have an awful lot to say about me because I'm a bad person and I'm this and I'm that and I'm the other because I stand up for the poor and unfortunate rather than bullying poor disabled people who are stuck in hospital and whose life is already pretty fucking shit and they spend their time trying to what's the word, make them poor. Ah. It depends on how many trays of ice cube trays you got, how big the freezer is, and if you can keep the tap running. Yeah, like I was saying, well, you'll find out because the people who are hiding behind the shroud of they're not. Yeah, it is terrible, isn't it? Bullying the poor fuckers who have already got the pretty much most miserable, miserable existence and doing their level best just to be happy. These fake spiritual frauds bully people like that because they're fucking weak and they can't have them question their authority. So there you go. And they'll also say very bad things about me. But if you know me, you'll know that I couldn't hurt a fly and dogs, cats, babies, children love me. And that's usually a sign of a good person, not a fucking nasty, horrible devil. But you know, I got my allies. How are we, Miss Blipper? Look, try to see shit, Miss Blipper. It's my big gay 13 star with the old big gay halo. Exactly. Oh, what did that one say? Anyone? What does that say? I don't get how you can't like you can't I get it. So you're protected. I say I don't get how you can't like review the messages yourself, but that is why. It's yeah. So what we doing, Mr. Flipper? How we having a good day? What does it say, Mr. Flipper? You're in charge today, Mr. Flipper. Hey, it's all done. I've put all the chakras. Oh, brioche. Is that like a cheese? No, it's a wine, isn't it? I'm alright. It's nice, isn't it? I'm gonna put a little list of the places either side, and then put the two. Oh, I don't know what they were at the bottom that I've scrubbed out. Yeah, I'm alright. Just had a little. I mean, a few days chilling. while the world keeps turning, as it were. So it's interesting. You get little tidbits of information for people. Well, I've not been involved in the circus, but luckily I've got my allies. Apparently, the best ally anyway. But yeah, I'm right. Solstice later on today, and that's why it won't be very sunny in this country. I don't know about Italy. I mean, is solstice a big thing in Italy? I can imagine it's not mainstream. It's quite popular in this country. It's still not mainstream here, but I imagine paganism isn't quite as prevalent as it is in this country. It might well be though. I mean, it should be, really, shouldn't it? I got a new little device I forgot I had. Nothing because it didn't qualify for the. Ooh, oh dear. And America are doing all right, aren't they? Scotland lost last night. I stayed up to watch it. Well, nothing. I can't believe it. I thought they'd be supporting England. So actually, who I reckon they support Spain, not France. Definitely not France. More likely Spain, I would say. Of all the countries in the World Cup. Really? Oh, cool. Nice. Where's that name come from? Freeze. Oh, yeah, it's warm. You're in the Norfolk, aren't you, Cosmic Dancer? You don't mean Norfolk, Virginia, do you? German, like as in Friesland, like Holstein Friesians. Frisia. Yes. You'd think you played for Chile, wouldn't you? Yeah, I know, I don't know. I know. Well, the North, is that, I think it's called Norfolk Islands. Isn't the Pacific, the Norfolk Islands? Yeah, you think you played for Chile, wouldn't you? East of England. East Anglia, in fact. Yeah, you think Freeze would play for Chile, wouldn't you? Oh, he's good, that old fucking. I want to see Captain Chaos then, that old bloody manifester. So I got this, it was like a docking station for my old, tablet. It's actually Ovaltine, which isn't very nice. It's supposed to have milk. I can't be fucked to get to the shop and buy the milk. Oh, hang on, what's going on there? So yeah, ran out of hot chocolate, so I'm on Ovaltine, which isn't very nice for water, if I'm honest. But it's something. Yeah, did you get that bad joke about Freeze playing for Chile? Anyway, so yeah, I'm imagining the solstice and pagan rituals aren't too big in Italy, but maybe they are. Maybe there's a pagan revival. Chile is cold. Freeze. Get that? Freezing. Chile cold. I'm waiting for the response there now. Ah, she says, I get you. That was terrible, but actually very good. Yeah. Ah. What? I love it. Oh, me too. I'm thinking I'm going to go to Glastonbury. Mind you, a few years back I went up Brent Knoll and from recording it, I had this amazing experience. Sadly, got lost because I didn't fucking record it from my phone on the TV. There you go. Oh, there we go. What does this one say? Message held review. What we got, Mr. Dipper? Don't save me. I can take it whatever they say. We're gonna party like 1959. Yeah, what's it like? Would you rather? Oh, you're an idiot. Piss off. There we go. They'll all be coming in now. They'll all be coming in now. Once one opens the floodgates, they all start flying through. I don't even know why would anyone even bother saying that. It just makes themselves look absolutely stupid. But I suppose pushing. Yeah, but there you go. They just want you to say a combination of words so that you say a colour. Wow, smart cookies. Silly people. Yeah. So what's the is there a pagan revival going on in Italy? I mean, they got more chance of winning a pagan revival than they have the World Cup. That's for sure. Who, oh, of course, you're supporting USA. What? Who? Who's your second team in the World Cup, Miss Bipper? England or Scotland? I reckon it'll be Scotland. And to be honest, I'd actually prefer Scotland to win the World Cup from England. Just because I always like, you know, a pagan revival. And obviously, yay. No, because obviously Rome being the cradle of Catholicism, but like a pagan revival. So, hmm. You know, what I mean is there much? Do people go out and usher in the solstice in Italy much? Ah, fucking hell! Imagine, wow! It must be the first time ever that there's Italy rugby team better than the Italy football team. Wowee! Cool. Imagine saying that in Rome. Yeah. What amazes me, Flipper? Do people get into solstice and that much in Italy? So I imagine it's sort of a bit of a taboo subject, really. I suppose I suppose on the map, the Mediterranean would be the worst. But as far as the map of Tolkien, ah, as far as Tolkien's concerned, Middle Earth is like the mid. Medi means half. Does it mean half? Does Medi? Terra. Yeah. I'd say it means centralized world. Yeah. They are meteopathic in general. So they change like the weather? I'm not sure what that means. It's a bit early or a bit late. But yeah, Mediterranean. So I reckon it means like the world revolves around the Mediterranean in their mind, because I suppose that's where the world centralized was. Miss Pippa is the person to ask on this subject, I would say. But is that right? YouTube weather. And the olives and the grapes. The vino. Oh, my eyes are itchy again. I should have a shit sleep pattern. Sleep for days and I'm awake for days. Oh, and I'm taking my fucking antihistamine. That's probably why. Well, you wouldn't think it'd be very antihistamine today, but I'd imagine they've been using their bloody weather weapons against us. It's expensive to live. Well, I'd imagine it's not expensive. I don't know about rent. We don't have to pay for central heating. And I say, is food cheaper? Food seems to be better across the board. Like in France, they have nice restaurants and that at the railway stations, whereas in England you just have crappy, shitty sandwich bars, or shops that sound French. Ah, good point. Good point. Or a fan, like I've got going on. I'm not indigenous, but they're self. Ooh. Is that right? It's all relative, isn't it? Yeah, it's all relative. But yeah, as far as Mediterranean is concerned, as a word, is it like almost like in England everything's sort of London centric, or mostly it was. They tried to stop it, but it is. So medio means half. Does medi mean half? No, demi means half, doesn't it? Oh, I suppose medium is half. Large, small, medium. About half. or does it? Oh, I don't know. But yeah, it makes sense. The middle world. Hmm. Good point. Very good, wasn't it? Very, very well spotted. Terranium. Oh no, Terra. Hello, hello, Krishudas. Terra Earth. Well, we didn't have any tomatoes or pineapples actually. I wasn't a fool. So would I have the Hawaiian pizza? Oh, I wouldn't even mean Hawaii, would there? Well, that would have been rubbish. But they would have had bread and olives. So they might have had garlic bread, I reckon. Definitely. And hummus. Yeah. Unless only celiacs don't like pizza. Is that CE Liax? Was that before Liax or after Liax? Or was that BCE Liax? Or a backwards scale? Ooh, a backwards scale. I like it. What's backwards scale? It's like a. What's backwards scale? I don't know. I can't even think. I'm quite hungry now, actually. Yes. What is the time? No, it's on 8:30. It's a bit early for me. Go in the shop. Rainy as well. Yeah. Yeah. What are you going to say, Mister? Apart from what extractions? I think I'm going to go back to sleep. My eyes are itching too much. I had a fucking. It's gone down a bit actually. I don't know if it was Sky. Yeah, I have still got a Sky. It's gone down a lot though. My plan is to go back to sleep for a bit, then get up, then plan my assault on Glastonbury and the forthcoming ushering in of the winter. What about you? I think I'm going to go to bed. Translating. We've done a bit of translating today actually. Translating words in disguise. Yeah, I'm going to go back to sleep for a bit, I think. I was going to go and meet my mate, but I think he's gone back to sleep as well. So what I should probably do, yeah, that's what I've got. It's fan. In fact, is that a fan really loud? Because it should be, because it's right next to the microphone of my phone. But I feel like you can understand me quite well with the fan on. Fan on. Yes. Right, you're super cool, Miss Flipper, in all honesty. But as far as temperature is concerned, I reckon it's going to get pretty warm today, which ain't great.
There's
Oh,
even an Egyptian tie-in here.
Miss Flipper, I get my new teeth on the 2nd. So on the at 9 o'clock. So on the 2nd, by about 12 o'clock, I can go without a massive hole. Well, there should be a massive hole, but it won't be as big.
You know, and all of this is still to be answered. Because even when you get certain motifs in the Greek, there's no doubt that there's a Phoenician, the Cadmean alphabet comes from the Phoenicians, not the Greeks, but the Greeks picked it up, this alphabet, and then it became the Roman, you know, and obviously morphed over time, and so on you could go. But this one is interesting that the
I had a
preoccupied.
digital scan on Thursday. No, well, I do talks, yes, and talk. I have been asked to do a talk from the Historical Society in my town, but they just go over their heads, if I'm honest. Although, I should just do it. Oh, I'll wait for my tea first. Hello. Well, I'm going back to sleep for a bit. Lovely. Hand them to the author, then also write. Well, my teeth, they should probably be a bit yellow actually, to match the other ones, if I'm honest. Right, I'm gonna head down,
Matters. So there's a definite correspondence there.
and I'll let you all enjoy.
Supremacy of the word logos as the basis of all
Michael
reality.
Soren.
Oh my God. Book of John, in the beginning was the Word. Well, I'm sorry, folks, that is not only Greek, it's a single individual within Greece. Heraclitus, the great philosopher.
Right.
So it's not John. Very little in the book of John.
Nothing.
John.
Nothing.
Very little in the Gospels.
Missed out on nothing.
And
everything.
Apostle Peter's name was the Gospels. All of that we know. But this one is particularly true. And to put this line, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, is just purely Greek. It's almost like they don't even want to hide it. But it's not just Greek. It comes from Heraclitus, who is one of these individuals who's going to play a part as we move through this, who is now saying, I don't know about these gods. Yeah, you got your gods, that's all right. And the same thing is going to happen in Judaism very early on. After the first temple was built, during the period of the Deuteronomists. You're getting, after that period, you get the same kind of...
Hey, Mr. I love you.
Yeah, the gods.
Yeah, because we're down to the spirits just will sort themselves out.
Yahweh,
I'm still there. I'm just going down.
You got your gods, but I think
So I have to take my top off. It's too hot. I can't sit here with my boobs out. So
logos. But guys, logos
that's why I like
is
listening.
For word. So in the beginning was the logos. Comes out of Heraclitus, and he is.
But yes, because we're down to the spiritualists.
With the king of the Persians, you see. So this
They
is
don't
the
sort themselves out because
somebody called John or
the fakes get caught
so that one
out by being vicious, nasty, little fucking horrible people. And the good ones
even of the gods
shall be shining in the light of God.
connected with fire, tentatively. It's fire-like. It's energy. He's basically energy or force, or even will or animus. There's been a million terms, used for it. But this man discovers this, and it turns up in the Bible. Well, that's interesting because, as we said on previous programs, David and Goliath and the most beautiful men in the world turn up as Lucifer. There seems to be a lot of things turning up from the four corners of the world in the scriptures. But go to the next one.
Those are the lights, guys.
Moved from henotheism to monotheism.
Yeah, not strictly them alone, but again, a movement. What we're looking at is an interesting movement that runs along historical grounds. The Greeks start with this big pantheon, but as time goes by, they become more and more interested only in the one.
They get caught up in their own selves. They have to get back to the drawing board. Then they're left to eat humble pie and start again.
That the gods were
He who laughs or she who laughs laughs longest.
With very close bridges. Some are a little further away, but others are almost right close. The bridge is very short, and that is the same thing in Judaism. Now, some Jews think of the God as very impersonal and far away. But as we moved on more towards the Christian message, and then you have your Messiah as well. And then you have your Els and your Baals. Baal meaning
We
Lord.
all have our faults,
So
but bullying fucking
somewhat more
disabled
esoteric
people
Jews
is
who
pretty
think of their God as
fucking
very
shit.
distant and remote thing. There's a Grecian element here as well.
and masking it all
In
in.
any case, even Yahweh,
In
when
the
Moses
golden
speaks talking
robes
about,
of spirituality and
pretty human
namaste,
life,
namaste,
wrathful,
they always
vengeful,
get found out
and all of
because
that, and
they
of
are
course,
fake.
it's undoubtable that this anthropomorphization existed. How
Actions
many
speak
point
louder
out that
than
the Greeks
words,
had it?
and the words you use
And
are
you can't
quite
even believe it.
important.
And it's very common to
The way you
Christianity
say them.
to anthropomorphize deity in the way that the Greeks were also doing.
Goodness is holy and preferred.
Yeah, this is another element. The Jews certainly believe that living a good life. See, whereas Calvin, it doesn't matter if you live good. If you want to do good, do it, but it doesn't make one bit of difference. God has already judged you for hell, and that's it. But the Jews didn't teach that. Of course, there's many different schools within Judaism, but generally the idea was try to do as much good on this planet as you can. And the Greeks already had that too. That in the essence of what is, whether it's the logos,
I'm just going to spend every single day highlighting
votives,
the fact
and sacrifices to
never
the gods, it's good. Trying to be good to the
Yeah,
God.
exactly.
And also the gods are themselves at their heart good. They're not merciless. They're not evil. They're not.
It's when you see their fucking wheels fall off, and they go absolutely batshit crazy, and they can't fucking control themselves.
Beauty is goodness. They took it so far that they believed that anything beautiful
I like
was
that
inherently
shit.
good. They were wrong there,
Because
all right, but
no matter what they say about you, if you had done fuck all wrong, but they're vitriolic and nasty,
a sacerdotal life.
you can't hack
Sacerdotal
it.
life will
Can't
represent
hack
self
it.
service to others, obedience to God, and all of those good things.
Compose holy books.
Because
Writing became central
basically,
to spiritual practice.
Yeah, that doesn't need an explanation. A very common thing between
the
the
truth
two.
always
By the
comes
time of
out in the wash.
Deuteronomy, especially in Judaism,
No
the
matter
book
how
became
fucking much
important.
you
They brought
namaste,
this book as
namaste,
they were going
namaste,
into the temple.
namaste.
And they came out.
If you're a
The thing we're
fucking
going to
vicious
discuss
little
is they opened
viper,
it to the people.
your
But before
forked
we get into
tongue
that remarkable
shows,
event, by the way,
and all those who follow
both
you
cultures at all
shall
at the
be
same time
stung by
start
the fucking
thinking
sting in the
that,
tail.
well, not just a thing, but to write down, and then to hold those books as important and sacred.
I don't
Certainly
care.
the Jews
You need
did
to come
this with
around.
the
There's no, as
Commandments,
far as
the
I'm
tablets,
concerned,
and the holy
I've seen
books,
it.
and
That's
the
all I need
rabbis
to
and their
see.
scrolls, but the Greeks were onto it already.
And before
as well.
long,
And then
everyone
thinking
will
of the
see
book
it,
itself,
and they'll have to
even
fucking
Homer,
hide their
even
head
Iliad,
in
Odyssey,
shame.
Hesiod, all of these guys
It's all
it was
good though.
considered sacred works. I mean, these were like, you can't even believe the amount of, the Greeks in the whole of the empire with these books under their arm, using phrases, catchphrases, anecdotes.
Nice one, Joel.
These
Thank
books
you.
were holy. All of the great histories of the Greeks were holy, and this, all of it. Once you get into it, but again, just even thinking only of Odyssey or Iliad and books of that nature, and the Euripides, and then Aeschylus, and all of this, these are actually considered almost the divine scripts, actually.
Selfhood matters.
Yeah. This is the key of what we're going to talk about today, but we'll
Thanks for
skip
the
it
night.
briefly and move on. But it's obvious that something is happening even in the personality of the worshipper. But we'll get to that in a minute. What's next?
God cares for the ordinary folk, not just kings, warriors, priests, and prophets.
Nah, no different.
Conceded by the temple, not all of the Jewish priests, they thought of themselves as very high, of course, but a great many. Israel was loaded with priests. And these
We've got
Deuteronomists
different DNA though now because they've had the Jabberwocky.
It's one of the reasons
When
they
you
open
have
the
the
scriptures to
Jabberwocky,
be read by the ordinary
you become
housewife or
subhuman.
shepherd or whatever, because it
And,
really starts to devolve.
I don't care
Look,
who
it's
that
not just
offends.
David and Solomon and Cyrus the Great and
It is
the ones
cool.
who are ministers of the God or the Pharaoh. Hey, the little shepherd. David started as a shepherd, didn't he? So there was a shift here that's often not noticed. These are things we need to get through to the audience. And in Greece, it was happening the same. That the little shepherd boy, the little fisherman
Don't worry.
kid,
You'll work it
a
out.
humble blind person, like you say, the ordinary urbanite. God spoke directly to them, could do, and animated them, and celebrated their individualism, and spoke to them directly, even if God wasn't speaking abroad to everybody else. So this is the nascence, the seed of individualism. We'll be talking a lot more about that in a minute. Let's go through the rest of this next.
A human can become godlike.
That's right. From down up, and from up down. From down up. you can listen to the voice of God, but
I
there's
suppose it
another.
is a bit of Star Wars.
Listen, there's David becoming
There's certainly
there's
technology
Samuel,
involved.
Saul, but you have it on the Greek side as well.
Sci-fi.
The individual can be God
Oh,
inspired, God
sci-fact actually.
and also then move up in rank from the lowly
A bit of
position that
fiction
you're
as
in
well.
to God. These are ideas you see we forget about. You didn't get that in Egypt. The God is the Pharaoh man, and that's it, and everybody's in their place. So something also is going on here where the idea is coming into the mind that I can rise above my station. I don't have to be born in a priestly class. I don't have to be special in that particular sense. I can move, autonomously towards a spiritual, divine beinghood. Very, very important. And these ones where we've gone through are by no means the only ones. But by the time of Alexander the Great, he came on in the 4th century, like 300 BC. Those that you've mentioned and others are now firmly found in Judaism. Now, we've already pointed out one that's original, and that was the idea of a word and a logos. Well, why did the rest not need to be Greek originally? We don't know. I'm not saying they are. But since one is definitely to be found, solidly in the Grecian world rather than the Jewish world, but it crossed over, hey, that opens the door, doesn't it? To the whole concept of how many others of ones we've gone through, and many others as well, cross-pollinated. So absolutely cross-pollination existed. And by the 4th century BC,
And you could make
you find
have a
these
great
elements.
day.
And
Enjoy the
later,
solstice
as
if you
the
can.
Jews
Enjoy
and
the
the Greeks
sunshine
started
in the morning.
cohabiting and all that.
Enjoy the day.
Now, the real big date, as we'll see, in terms of what we're going to get into, is 8th century BC. But we'll get to that in due course. It's just that by the 4th century and later periods, you really do see these Grecian elements. So these dates are important to keep in mind, especially if somebody is interested in actually, reading
Oh
the Jewish
shit! What did
Bible
you
and all
do?
that,
How did you do
and,
that?
and the Christian scriptures from later on.
You alright?
It has to be said that this cross-pollination existed.
You playing football again?
Now, the thing, though,
Tap
we want to do
dancing,
after
ice skating,
confirming what your guests are saying, and that it goes,
rollerblading,
the important thing is really,
surfing,
the
skateboarding.
thing of utmost importance
I
is to
know.
sort of carry on from where we were.
There's a
Julian
very good
James
chance I might fall asleep in it, so I do
discussion.
apologise.
And people could, really need to go back and check that one out to get a grip on what we're talking about here, because he was a man who brought up questions like, what is religion anyway? Why
How
are
did
we
you
all
break your ankle?
preoccupied?
I know what it's like. I
with
broke my
why is it
ankle
a human
years
phenomenon in
ago.
the first place?
Fucking pain.
Underlying questions,
It's a
rather than
right
just being a
bugger
believer,
because
you step back and start to say, what is the phenomena of religion?
weight goes on the ankles.
And then again,
Very
I would say
delicate,
that
aren't
in
they?
that list,
I
as we'll
broke my
see by
left
the end,
ankle. I
there's
broke everything down the
another
left side actually.
truth concealed within that list that very few people in the world would ever notice.
Shoulder,
You have to
elbow,
be familiar with James, you
thumb,
have to be familiar with Owen
ankle.
Barfield, a great colleague of C.S. Lewis, who spotted it, and had a great deal to say. He wasn't a Christian himself. He was to German Romanticism and the English equivalent. He was a great German romantic and idealist. British idealist.
Nose as well, but I suppose
Romantic,
it's in the
but
middle.
very much in the tradition of not only Rudolf Steiner, but Hegel and Schelling and all of that. We don't want to spend time on that. But the thing that's in that list that is hard, it is hard for somebody
how
to put
did you
their
break
finger
your
on unless you
ankle?
were familiar with Julian James's work in Barfield. So I would say definitely to make sense of this, people would need to go back and look at the one we did. It's excellent anyway. So I really wanted to continue a little bit of what I was saying there before about
I wish you
identity.
a speedy
That's the human
recovery.
identity. How did that develop? The sense of selfhood and I-ness that we have. That has an etiology. Everything in this world develops through historical stages. So what about I? What about the kind of thinking that we know today and the subjectivity? This is where Julian James come in, and he has his interpretation. But it doesn't mean it's the only one, and it doesn't even mean it's right. He spoke about the metaphysical internalization. Remember, there's really no pockets in the brain, where you find this little self. running around cartoon-like, so where's this voice coming from? And then we went into all of that, but yeah, Nolan Barfield's theories run along similar lines. And then it's not just identity. What Barfield is trying to show is that it's not just the human identity, it's the divine identity has changed. And he noticed that they've run together. Two critical processes happening together. He clearly said is that monotheism as we know it and individualism as we know it run together. They develop together through time. And the Greek-Jewish parallels are where to look to, find evidence for this. Around about this time of say the 8th century BC, there is what scholars have called a Great Awakening that takes place in terms of identity and selfhood that wasn't there before. And studying Greek art gave people an indication that something mentally had changed. When you go back to the James thing, you'll remember me making the point that most scholars know that what we call selfhood is very recent historically. And so different dates have been offered. But this one is very strong. This 8th century BC is kind of strong. It's not the only one that can be offered, but it's certainly the strongest one that I think would gain a lot of consensus. 8th to 6th century, something's happening in terms of personality. Not just personality, social changes as well, but in the psyche, the psychology of man. And this is why it's always fascinating me. Okay? So simply said, is the consciousness that we know today. It is recent, historically, and it wasn't always the rule. Which begs the question, well, then, what kind of, how did the ancestors think? And of course, that's where the whole thing then breaks down, really, because you have to be a Julian James or a Barfield to work it out, because ultimately, how can we know? We're not there with our TV cameras. We can't falsify any statement that would be made. But you can get an intuitive gist from poetry, from music, from certain things in our own lives that are alluded to by James and by Barfield. But yeah, that makes sense. That looks like it might come from a different kind of consciousness. Well, after all, what are football stadiums? What is our penchant for collectivism? Look at the mass hysteria that we know today. Or one thing becomes a meme, and even masses upon masses of people. And
Remember earlier that I said agents can call agents? Well, that isn't just a one-off. Increasingly, we're seeing
even masses upon masses of people in completely foreign parts of the country in the world are latching onto it. So there's certain communal things that also seem to spread. These memes, right? But it's just crucial to remember that the ancients thought differently than we do, perhaps even radically, and they thought about everything. But we can't go into everything. All we can do is, what did they think about themselves? How did early man, Jewish, Greek, whatever, Irish, what was their thinking about self? Julian James says there wasn't even any thinking about self. We can't even conceive of that. So this is a little bit what we want to explore that I bring to this whole question of the Greek influence, because it's in Greek literature that this was first substantiated, the things we're talking about. Barfield was looking to Judaism, looking to Christianity, but when they looked at the Grecian stories, they found their evidence, whatever evidence there was. So in Judaism, around the 8th century BC, this is the age of the Deuteronomists. The temple is being built, these holy works are discovered, Deuteronomy, and this caused a change because the priests of the time did something quite extraordinary. And they said that the ordinary people come into the temple can be given tracts of this Deuteronomy to read. And since it's the word of God and it's the song, the story of the race, it's a saga, we want the ordinary people, because before that was off limits. What do you need a priesthood for? So, and then the upshot of this, because there's a lot of ground to cover, but in brief, the Deuteronomy began a new age of God being a phenomena within. It's right there in Deuteronomy. God is within you, which had never been said before. Look at Greece, God's rose outside. Look at Judaism. If you worship the God, you had to go to a grove. You had to go to a stone, like a Bethel stone. You had to go to a high place, especially if you worship the goddess. But even if you worship the God, like why did Moses go to the mountain? Sinai, Horeb, and on and on. It was always a place on earth identified as the place from which the God spoke, or where you felt closer to God. The Celtic lands, the Greek Celtic lands are full of this. Deuteronomy, 8th century BC, that kind of stops, or by the 6th century, it's going to stop. God is now within you. You are Bethel. You are the temple of the living God. To culminate with Jesus, centuries later.
Namaste.
But wait a minute, what's going on here? Well, what's going on here, Barfield, the divine is internalized, which begs the question, well, what kind of reality was it before God was internalized? Because we all have that. We're all descendants of that internalization through Christianity and the programming and the beliefs in it. Well, what did they do before? We would, rightly ask, and that's what then, opens up. We don't have time to explore all of that. So the priests allow the ordinary folks to read the book of Deuteronomy. And from there on, basically, Jews were allowed to contemplate the scriptures themselves. To Christianity, a bit of a time to catch up with that, but there you have it. Now, prior to that, of course, Barfield talks about that the ancestors before this, actually, he says this state that I'm going to mention lasted up until about 1,000 years AD, and it started to fade only 1,000 years AD. It's called original participation, is the term that he used other terms. As that faded, you get things like reciprocal participation. But we have time only to talk about this. And then later, as it devolves completely, we get what he called is the age of idolatry. But not too systematic a writer. Basically, idolatry, I personally believe he meant it came in a lot earlier too. This crossing over point between original participation fading and then the age of idolatry. And I really think, that it goes back BC as well. But these things overlap. Right? But original participation, which is a kind of state of consciousness we could never really grasp anymore, except maybe when listening to music. Like I said, these numinous experiences. But the world had it. All the races had it. And by the time they became identifiable races, it's lost. See, it maps across what Julian James was saying. Now this leads to something very interesting. So bear with me here, right? Oh, and by the way, if Ralph was talking here, he'd say, well, maybe this has to do with the age of Aries passing into the age of Pisces, because there's a processional action here as well. So, we're making things brief that we could really explore in detail. We just want to keep it that why religion? Remember the phenomena of religion? Religion isn't worldwide. Religion is divided into these priestarchies and sects. There's Jews, there's Muslims, there's Christians, there's Jews, there's Jains. And then a million different denominations within Christianity. We're looking at this phenomenon. And we've already established that the phenomena of religion itself and worshiping God develops, especially monotheistic type of religion, as the concept of individuality also develops historically down through time. Something that would fascinate the philosopher Hegel, because history is key to all of this. But we even have then, as I said, the procession, which also, clever people will take on board there. But don't you see also that something's happening with these priests of the Deuteronomist age? At this exact time in Judaism, the many gods are being shrunk into the one. The whole question of Yahweh's supremacy at the end, well, Yahweh was really sort of like not that important to all the, sort of a moon god. And in my Trees of Life book, I track all that back. It's actually a tree god, believe it or not. Probably one of the reasons why you get Christmas trees in your house, right? At Christmas. But the thing is, no, Yahweh was a minor sort of god, just like Aton had been in Egypt, and then suddenly Baal and El Shaddai and El and whatever you've got, Asherah, Anat. My goodness, the list goes on here. All these gods now. The volcano god, the fire god, they're just vanished. And they become the Elohim. One school of thought. because Elohim is a word that goes back to the Egyptian Alim, Aleim, and it sort of, well, it connotated the followers of the god Ta, you know, demigods who followed the All Father Ta, if you have to get into it. But then it was adopted by other peoples and other cults. But it was always, the number 9 seemed to be always going along with this Eliam, or the Elohim, the 9, the council of 9, the gods of the 9. So the Jews are doing something very similar. They bracket the other gods. We're almost banishing them, and we have one. We picked Yahweh, but then of course Yahweh, the name Jehovah, is then divided into 4 sacred letters, with each letter being a god. Or God, IHVH. He's 4 in 1. He's 3 in 1. He's a Trinity. I mean, the whole thing is still theistic, for goodness sake. They're doing their best to bring one God out of the pantheon. Whether they did, the Trinity is a leftover of the Elohim, the quaternity of the Tetragrammaton in Judaism is a leftover from the Elohim. I mean, yeah. Nice try, guys. But really what this does is it confirms Julian Jaynes' idea, because if you're shrinking the gods to one, what did he say about the audio hallucinations? Many gods spoke to us. It's also a psychological, because we've always got to keep the sinew, the connecting tissue between what's happening psychologically and what's happening theologically here. Otherwise, the whole thing comes apart. So Julian Jaynes is confirmed here because that's exactly what happened internally, where the voices of the gods shrunk away, sort of evaporated, dissipated, and we get the one central ego voice, which we take for ourselves. The voice you hear in the head is your voice, right? Well, you put the signature on it. I don't know anything more about that. Maybe some mental deception going on. I don't know. But in the pre-Homeric in Greece, in the pre-Homeric, this is before the great writings. As I said, the land had been ruled by this mysterious group called the Mycenaeans, and they vanished. And slowly, this Greek empire starts to expand, and other places fall under its jurisdiction. The Jews will also fall under its jurisdiction. So in all of this, we also have this other thing that we started with about who is borrowing from whom. And the thesis now looks like the Jews are the ones that are actually in the receiving end. Probably not all, right? Because the Greeks did translate the Hebrew Bible and probably had a lot of interest. In fact, I'm doing work later on that shows that they were very favorable to Judaism, and there was a lot of leakage back and forth. Let's remember that. And could this be also with the idea of the gods? See, in the Greek pantheon, the gods, like in India and other places, is always some external face. You have all of the Furies, what do you call them, the Graces, what's the other one? The 3 Muses, and the rest of the pantheon are sort of external beings that seem to affect you as if my neighbor affects me, or the king has affected me. It's like the external fates pass judgment on my life. They're external forces. Now this is changing in Greece, just as it's changing in Israel, where the force that moves you decrees what you're going to do, or if you're a sinner or not sinner. This is all moving to the interior. And by the time of the playwright Sappho, and by Euripides in Greece, this is happening, as there's a more of a concretization, as you read, of individualism. So by the 6th century BC, you notice these scholars, because remember, where's the evidence? Well, the evidence turns out to be in pottery and artifacts, because they're noticing such extraordinary changes in design. Lots of spirals, lots of geometric shapes prior to the Homeric period, closer to the Mycenaeans. And then as we get more to this period of Euripides, it's changing. Also, these weird, almost insect-like human beings. Well, let's make it simple. There's no facial features of any individualism in the early period. It's just a strange kind of mask-like face and weird sort of insect-like bodies, and no distinguishing marks. Just like later, perspective came in late. Well, in the later period of the Greeks, you start getting actual character faces with expression, proper human expression, for instance. and also the form of the body becomes also more realistic. And then there's also perspective. So faces have expression, bodies are more realistic as we would recognize them instead of sort of usual looking, animal-like, and perspective comes in. Now these are big, big, big things that show that there was this sort of great awakening when it came to somebody's relationship with the planet, with the world, and with reality. Did you know that up until this time, very late in the day, there was no word for living body? The word soma, which everyone points to, oh, well, they had soma, it meant corpse. It actually meant that which is no longer with us, that which is emptied of life. Soma, still used today, somatic. Oh, wait a minute, what the heck? Why? Because they said that something had vanished. Is James right then? That we are soma? We're walking around, we think we're living, but actually the gods have vacated us in this state of original participation, so to speak, and that's been lost. Well, that's what Barfield says. Barfield says, yeah, you are corpses now. You lost the original participation. You've got something else. It's called religion, right? Incredible. But then they studied also literature of this early period and discovered that, as I said in the previous podcast, there's not much in the way of private rumination in either the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible. Again, you're directed to do things and you respond to those directions, but you don't sit ruminating, and there's not much private journaling. Suddenly that comes in. Suddenly around the 8th century, and towards the age of Sappho and Euripides in Greece, this starts coming in where private thoughts are being discussed. People are pacing up and down and contemplating and speaking about how they're feeling and thinking within. That level of expression is, again, historically recent. You get more contemplative characters. You get the beginnings of biography. That we would, if you read Hamlet, you're accepted. Hamlet is a very modern figure, isn't he? Woe is me, and to be or not to be, that is the great question. That looks like a modern character, and nobody would stop and balk. But that is completely historically recent. Characters in plays for thousands of years did not do that. And so when they started doing it in the Greek theater and all, it was like, hey, run that guy out of town. What's that? Who's this playwright? Something had changed. And by the 5th century is when we first get in art perspective, to be precise about that. So people can think nothing of any of this, or they can just think, well, I don't know. Those are remarkable psychological changes. So the key thing that's happening from the Deuteronomist period onwards is this internalization of divinity. But here's the weird twist in that. You can't suddenly, they know this, that groves, hills, altars, even temples and churches are starting to be abandoned as people like maybe have a little altar in their home or the sacred text. And you don't necessarily even have to go to the temple anymore at this point. And that was considered okay. They'd like it if you did, but if you stayed at home, so what? God is within you. But if God is within me, Barfield is saying, aren't you important now? Because we're talking about this concretization and reification into individualism. We said that the two went together, monotheism runs along individualism. Yes, it does, because the moment that I really understand that the God is within me, not down there in Thebes or in Jerusalem, something happens to me on a psychological level. I'm kind of like important now, right? So there's an egoistic aspect to this. Don't make it with a prejudicial statement at this point. It's just that you feel much more important as a person. Look at Moses. Is Moses one of these guys that was first animated by, and he could walk anywhere he went? You don't see him doing anything more than having a portable tabernacle or whatever. That's what I mean. Now, you thought that the priests would have said, oh, wait, we can't be giving them Deuteronomy. Don't give them any books, because that's the end of us. For some strange reason, they did. And I think it's because of some, cataclysmic things that were happening, and in order to galvanize the public, this happened. But, that's another story. The main thing is they took the chance, and they said, we'll still be needed to interpret. And that's exactly what happened. the Levitical priests and the priests of the temple became liturgical. They became the ones that said, if you have a problem reading the scripture and you're not aware, you can't work out what God means here, we are there to explain it to you. But we'll just give you our explanation. It's not taking away from yours. So the roots of where we are today is to be found in its rudiments, of course, back there, where a certain amount of freedom. And if you have to then interpret the scripture on your own, don't you have to have a reason? Don't you have to be sort of worldly wise? Don't you have to have an intellect? But coalescing are all these mental categories, mental capacities that we have today. Priest is still there, as he is today. Make out of what you will, but ultimately, you're meant to sit in your home, in your domicile, read the text, and then as you're farming or whatever you do, think about it. Now, this is remarkable. But what Barfield is saying, yeah, it's remarkable, all right. Think of what is really happening here. There's a devolution. There's a concentration on the individual's mind, whereas before there was a very different dynamic. So there's a certain abandonment then of churches, temples, holy places. And even admonitions in the Bible about to abandon them. By the way, if you really get into it, the kings and priests are asking the public to throw over these pagan places. But it just simply tells, somebody would say, well, what did they do then? Before this, what did a pagan type of mind do when he was at the stone or when he was at the temple site? So you've got questions, right? From now on, you could just have a moving altar, a moving tabernacle, a moving set of scrolls or whatever. And this is exemplified in the story of Moses. So the idea is that if you are the God bearer and you're special, and this sense of ego identity, and we asked earlier on about identity, subjectivity, selfhood, the kind of person you are, the kind of thinking that you have, we're moving slowly towards the prey now. Something is changing. And what Barfield is asking is it God that matters then? At the end of the day, the cynic, or the critic, he said, if this ego inflation is taking place, at the end of the day, am I into my religion and my God because of religion and God, or because I have this, I'm the jackal here. I embody God, did you not know that? And since people like myself have always thought about self-deception lying at the heart of all syndromes, maybe we should give that thought. At the end of the day, somebody can question, is it really that there is a God now? Or divinity, or something really worth worshipping that's holy? Maybe there even is. But if alongside this, there's this other vanity. Vanity of vanity is always vanity. So that running alongside, where are we? Is that incidental? We've got questions. Now, around about this time, moving up towards the 4th century, but even before that, you get in Greece the age of the philosophers. Now, your previous guests, of course, didn't touch on this. But it's key to what we're mapping out. The age of the philosophers. We just talked about reason and logic and asking deeper questions about metaphysics and an attitude of life. You get your Stoics later, you get your Cynics later. People are asking, what way shall I live given what I know about reality? All of this is in the head. Leading up to Plato, Aristotle. These are the age of the philosophers. Probably starts with Anaxagoras. He was contemplating the mysteries of nature, almost the first time, which would, as I say, lead up to Aristotle, but there was a lot of others, right? There's changes. It's almost like the age of the philosophers signals a period where people are coming out of, say, a trauma and saying, oh, look at the world around us again. Because they're questioning, they're measuring, they're thinking. They're darting. Remember, who was it? Was it Democritus, or it might have been Anaxagoras, who was the first one, or one of the others, who said, I don't even think that the sun started to take a theory and go to seek for evidence to prove it. Take a hypothesis and then seek to prove it. But of course, again, you get this bugbear. It's something I'm doing. At the center of all of this activity, scientific or other, in the questioning mind is the I that is doing the question, which is getting stimulated, which is getting a little bit of a, animated because of this. So by the time this Heraclitus, say Parmenides, whatever, you are getting this great questioning even of the gods. Getting this individual who's standing up to question the gods. Well, who is this creature? We said it was Heraclitus who then decided that there's a fire element called the logos, or the word when it's translated, that is out there. And the word logos has enormous other meanings as well, many, many connotations. But it animates all life. And it was there at the beginning, and it's eternal. What doesn't that turn up in the New Testament, in the book of John? This underlying everlasting principle, it's traced back to the Greeks, as we said. But the two things are happening. In the Jewish world, there's a strengthening of individual identity, and in the Greek world, this is happening as well. And of course, the figure of Jesus, as he's described in the scriptures, not by Ralph Ellis and all of that, that figure, as described in the Bible and various other works, is a sort of a concretization, the ultimate, really, he's really the embodiment of what we're talking about. The embodiment of the man, God-man. You had other versions of it, it's irrelevant because this is what it's all about. And well, just like the gods got restricted to one, Yahweh, so does the panoply of God-men get shrunk. Even the Jewish Messiah is there, sort of in the background, but he's more a political figure. When it comes to these solar kings, these solar gods, Jesus is eventually going to reign supreme in the Christian world. Coalescing out of what happened in the past, he's the end point of that journey. So, thank Paul for that. That was just the myth mongering of St. Paul, Josephus lady that aided that on. But what Barfield would say is, no, not just that. What drove Paul to want to do that? It happened before. Yahweh was condensed, coalesced out of previous gods. Jesus is taken from a bit of the Messiah, from Apollonius of Tyana, from Jesus of Gamala. You got a lot of stuff back there, and he coalesces out of these sort of God men. Why are the public voting for it? What is Paul responding to? He's the PR man for it. He's the mythmonger. But something in the psyche of the you can invent anything. You can stitch up anything. Why does the world accept it? Why do we still accept a pope? Why a Muhammad? Why anything? Because there's a need now for this central icon of the human being that embodies the divine, that others will follow to the ends of the earth. It became practically a Jesus cult, custom made for people who have themselves embodied the spirit divine within, but there's still some hearkening back to it in the external way, the one on the hill. So the original participation is still there, but it's in a very, very stripped down, and yet at the same time it has a great power over us. It hasn't completely vanished. We still need the external icon and the trappings of that icon, like the hill, Golgotha. You'll still see elements of the original participation in all of this. After all, even the reciprocal participation or idolatry is still participation. It's just participation, way, way condensed. Many, many steps lower than it used to be. But again, hidden within this factor, logos, what's really taking place right now, again, is the internalization of that logos. It's not something I'm in, it's something that's in me. So I must then make that house clean for the logos, or the light, just say the light. Christians, the light. Well, if I'm the embodiment of the light, you need to recognize that and live goodly and live morally, so I can